Hi, and welcome to another live stream. First one of the week. I hope this one finds you well wherever you are. And I know, as always, there's people watching from all parts of the world. So you're all very welcome to the stream. And we've got a really interesting guest tonight and a really interesting topic. So yes, hi Leslie, good to see you. I can see Melanie. I can see all the different, all the usual suspects. I see you. Hi, Donny girl, all the way from Hawaii as well. It's good to have you here in the stream. What I'm going to do is my usual stuff because just so I can interact with you, I just want to bring up, if I can, on Gettr the stream so that I can see the folks over there as well. So just give me a second while I do that and hopefully don't disconnect myself and such like. So yeah, I've got the Gettrs going as well. So hi, yes, I see you joining there as well. So anyway, look, thanks very much for being here. And we've got a really interesting week ahead of us. We're going to, as always, tackle lots of stuff. And don't forget, by the way, that in addition to all of this, there's all the podcast stuff that goes out. You know about that. Hi, Vicky, all the way in Clearwater, Florida. Happy Columbus Day indeed to all my American followers. I hope you all have a great day. Have a good day. I see that popping up here. It's Canadian Thanksgiving as well. So who knew? So I'm getting this as an education. We haven't even started yet. Right, folks. Let's get into the meat of the matter now. You will know, because you've been following me on this one for a long time, we talk about lots of topics. And one of the topics that we've talked about has been critical race theory. And you'll recall there were different angles on critical race theory and the whole wokeness agenda. And of course, this is there's different perspectives on critical race theory that help us better understand exactly what does it mean. What does it mean for places like the United States in particular, indeed elsewhere in the West? What does it mean? Critical race theory, the whole wokeness. Now, that's where our special guest comes in, because I'm very pleased to have with me this evening and with you as well, my special guest, Mike Zhao from the US of A. Hi there, Mike.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. And as I say, we've got a good audience splattered around the world, quite a few in the United States. So okay, so and Canada. So they're all interested in what you have to say, and so am I, because as I say, this whole issue of CRT and wokery, it does dominate, Mike, the everyday agenda. But I think you can talk about it from a very sort of distinctive perspective, because I think I'm right in saying that, Mike, you and your family, you had to flee the communist China, come to the West, and therefore you have got a really deep understanding, I think, of this issue. So, folks, Mike has got a book out, which I think we can maybe flag up. Cue Mike's book. There we go. Critical Race Theory, Woke Culture, America's Dangerous Repeat of China's Cultural Revolution. So you can get that. It's on Amazon there, as you can see, if you want to go and buy it and educate yourself. Mike, say you come at this from a particular angle because you lived under tyranny and you recognize tyranny. And maybe just give us a little bit as an introduction about your own life and coming from China to the US.
Sure. Basically, I grew up in a regular working family in Kunming, China, southwest China. But during the Cultural Revolution, my father suffered political persecution. He endured public humiliation, torture, lost freedom for 5 years. But the political persecution did not stop at him, because my grandparents used to be landlords. and they were deprived of the rights to continue living in the city. They were forced to relocate to a poor mountain village. When I was 6 years old, I was forced to go with them to take care of them because both of them, my grandfather already disabled, my grandma already have symptom of heart attack. A few months later, heart attack strike again. My grandma, lost life, because of that poor mountain village. There was no tap water, no electricity, no nearby clinic. All the medical treatment was terrible. All of that, because of that, my family suffered extreme poverty. It relocated the residency, from mountain village back to Kunming for my grandpa, all kinds of political persecutions. And then my mom also passed away years later. But during Cultural Revolution, Chairman Mao, the dictator, number one, he took like a very radical ideology. He abandoned the free market system, banned private ownership, right? Nobody has incentive to work to produce. In addition, he focused the whole nation, continuing on the class struggle political campaign, pitting one group, persecuted the others. So because that, economy collapsed. I think you can show some image, basically, some like my father, the torture he suffered. Also, every urban city, like everyone was extreme poverty. Everything was rationed. And from clothing, this is a big image. My father, it's like public humiliation, but his bone was broken. Even worse than this. That kind of suffering. And in China at that time, everybody was extremely poor. Clothing, food, rice, even the bike, everything was rationed. A urban citizen like me, every month only got 2 pounds, 1 kilo, okay, 1 kilo of meat to eat. Even with that, I had to wake up like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning to really waiting in line for hours in order to really to get some nice meat at that time. So that kind of extreme poverty I suffered. So Cultural Revolution is one of the largest man-made disaster in human history. So that is kind of experience I endured.
Yeah, it's horrific. Yeah, I mean, it really was horrific. So at what point did your family leave then, Mike? When did that happen?
Yeah, a good thing happened is after dictator Chairman Mao died in 1976, right? Deng Xiaoping took the power. He launched the open open reform, that kind of policy.
Yeah.
He is wise enough to stop. He was wise enough to stop the class struggle movement in China, refocus China to the economic development. He also restored the college admission, education in China. So I was able to, although I suffered miserably, but I have strong willpower. I was able to, perform, had a very good academic performance, went to college. And actually, after Tiananmen Square incident happened, I lost hope about China because that leader who wanted to take China backward. So I came to America as a poor foreign student. When I came to America, I only took less than $200 in my pocket.
Right.
But because America is the greatest nation on earth, I achieved my American dream, later becoming director of global planning at Siemens Energy. So I came to America in 1992.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And then I think, Mike, it's fair to say that you came from China, you came to America, this land of plenty. But then the thing that you've started to see unfold, and which I guess your book is fundamentally predicated on, is you lived through Mao's Cultural Revolution. And I think, is it fair to say that you believe that the United States is being sort of forced into going through a similar cultural revolution? And if so, can we talk through the evidence for what you say?
Sure. Basically, what happened is 2 years ago, when Black Lives Matter launched a violent demonstration,
Yeah.
they toppled down the statue of Thomas Jefferson at George Washington. They also used cancel culture. Silence, took away the job of many people simply because they said some political incorrectness, right? Incorrect words.
Yeah.
So I wrote an article in Daily Caller, call it out as America's Cultural Revolution. And over the year, in that summer, another Chinese American called Bing Xie, and also last January, Chinese American parents in California, and also Chinese American parents in Loudoun County, Virginia, all stood up, called America's Cultural Revolution. So ever since 2020, I started to write this book on and off, research over 200 data like source, right? So that's the reason I basically summarized about 6 similarity. Basically, the first, so I think we can elaborate that. But the first thing I want to say is all have the Marxist root, right? In China, when the Cultural Revolution launched, was based on class struggle, economic Marxism, class struggle theory. But today, they launch on the cultural Marxism based on the racial struggle, pitting one group against other. Another is the terminology. They use even the same terminology, like a woke. This word was already used in China about 60 years ago. If somebody in China were indoctrinated and then totally believe in the Karl Marx theory, and they're sensitive about like the class struggles, this guy is called have 觉悟, means work. Okay, so today they still use. So this basically I list in my book 6 similarities. So I can elaborate.
Yeah, because as you say, so woke, it fascinates me that, because woke to me is something I've only really heard in the past couple of years, woke this, woke that. But as you say, it actually goes all the way back 60 years to China, what was happening in China. So that's scary. Actually, that is quite frightening that we're going through something that 60 years ago was happening across in China. It's really remarkable. I think we've got a couple of slides we want to bring up. Let's see, Mike, if we can.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, let's just chat through this slide here.
Sure.
This is the Maoist playbook, isn't it? The Maoist playbook #1.
Yeah. So basically, Mao is the one who followed the dictator Chairman Mao launched the Cultural Revolution, including Red Guards, the so-called revolutionary rebels, right?
Yeah.
That was, I see the similarity between what the radical left is doing with Maoist, right? They pretty much use the same playbook. The first one is using the Marxist lies to establish moral authority. They claim they claim they are the ones really care about the poor working class. Yeah, like in China, they care about the peasants. They fabricate lies, says the landlords cruelly exploit the peasants, right?
Yeah.
The very famous story is called White-Haired Girl. In Chinese, we call it Bai Mao. Basically, they made up a story, says, the girl's father was committed suicide because the exploration by the landlords, by Huan Shizhen. Actually, the landlord was the friend of her father and helped her father. Her father committed suicide because he has drug abuse. He has gambling issues. He cannot pay his debt. He committed suicide. Actually, the landlord took care of her, the girl and her brother. After that, her brother began to steal something from the landlords, and then being caught, they escaped to the mountain. In the mountain, because there's no enough salt, right? The girl's hair become white, But the communist China, the right propaganda guys, they made up stories, says that landlord exploit the poor, like the poor girl and her father. And there's a lot of, like, in my book list, at least 3 most famous example, all were lies. In America, they also use the same lies to say, they take care about the so-called disadvantaged minorities, like Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot, was a lie. Justice Smollett, story was a lie. And many other stories were lying. They even describe, say, policeman has a systemic exploration, systemic racism against the black. Actually, it's untrue, because, in 2019, only, like, according to Washington Post, between 13 and 15 unarmed black were killed by policemen. That only took up only 0.2% of total, like, black homicide in that year. In that year, every day, between 15 and 17 veterans commit suicide. Over 100,000 people died from drug abuse. The veteran suicide and drug abuse are much worse issues. So they use the emotion, disseminate that kind of George Floyd unfortunate death, these kind of things, to portray there's systemic racism against black. So that's kind of lies they are using. They exaggerate that. They use lies to really, to really disseminate their, like, racial struggle theory. That's the first playbook.
Okay, yeah, and of course the media, Mike, plays a significant role in sort of pushing that narrative as well, doesn't it? Because, like, Jussie Smollett and all that. I mean, I remember all these stories. The media jumped on them, ran with them as if they were truth, and then afterwards, when it's all proven to be lies, well, the media's moved on. They don't talk about it anymore. I mean, don't you think the media itself it facilitates this whole narrative, this whole lie, this deceit, this racism division of America? The media.
Exactly. In my book, I actually spend many paragraphs list how the media, they betrayed the spirit as a principle as a journalist. They took, stand. They do not really, verify the data resources. They should be objective. They should provide a balanced picture, to the audience, to the readers. So they failed miserably. You are exactly right. That is what happening in America.
Yeah, I think it is shocking. So then let's move on to the second part in the playbook. Let's bring up the next one. The divide and conquer, Mike. This is
So basically 60 years ago in China, the communists, right, Chairman Mao, they use class struggle theory and label Chinese people as oppressors, like landlords, like peasants as oppressed, right? They divided the Chinese people into, like, during Cultural Revolution, like 5 red categories, 5 black categories. So they divide people really against each other. That's a divide and conquer. Today in America, the critical race theory is doing same thing. They label the white as oppressors, people of color as oppressed. They also treat people differently. Back in China, landlords and their, like, children's, their assets be confiscated. Their children who had no chance to go to college. They have no chance to get a promotion. Only the revolutionary, their children have the chance, have a career, have a future. Today in America, we have race-based affirmative action. Asians and white being discriminated. They tried to impose so-called racial equity. Actually, back in China, Chairman Mao tried to impose economic equity today, in America, just change the formula. So from the class struggle to racial struggle. So that is the exactly same playbook, just simply change the economic to racial. That is what happened. It's the second playbook, I identified.
Because obviously the whole racial issue has got significance in the United States. So if you play divide and conquer using race, I guess that makes it all the more pernicious and all the more dangerous, because it stokes the fires, doesn't it? Instead, Mike, of people being able to live with each other regardless of their skin color, all of the Martin Luther King doctrine and all of that, that's all gone into reverse now, because it's okay to discriminate against some races but not others, and that's wicked in my view.
You're exactly right. Actually, the radical left in America, they already betrayed what Dr. Martin Luther King's dream. And in critical race theory, they claim Dr. Martin Luther King's colorblind society is no longer, can no longer help to remedy all the historic, things. So they want to have like preference policies, basically discriminate one against one race against the other, right? So they want to use the race as a factor in college admissions, in hirings, in promotions, use racial code. So that is totally wrong. They already betrayed Dr. Martin Luther King's, dream, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing about Black Lives Matter, Mike, that struck me. It goes against the essence of the Dr. Martin Luther King doctrine that your skin color shouldn't matter, and all lives matter. And yet, of course, if you say all lives matter, you're going to be described as a bigot, and you're going to be described as a racist probably as well. If you say that whatever the color of my skin is doesn't matter, my life is as valuable as anyone else's. That's a problem now, because some of these people, as you say, these agitators, these Marxist agitators, want to set us up in that way and divide us in that way.
They even went to extreme example, like anything Black community cannot perform well, they label as racist, right? Standardized tests, they label as racist. Learning math, they label as racist, right? So also a nuclear family being labeled as being attacked by the Black Lives Matter, right? So this is kind of things they are doing. They go to extreme in order to achieve so-called racial equity. They really attack the essence, the success elements of human society, which is have good family, nuclear. Good families, the education, these kind of things that they label as racist. That is how extreme they are willing to go.
And yet, Mike, those are the things that built America. That's what the success of the United States is built on. It's built on family values. It's built on the ability to get on and succeed in whichever area you're able to. Those are the things that made America great. And those are the targets for this new wicked ideology that's come in.
Exactly. Actually, I did not, have the image with you, but like my third playbook is called really governing by radical ideology. That is the commonality between what happened in China and what happening right now. Example, like as I mentioned, they don't want to use the pragmatic solution to help develop economy, help bring the minority upward, improve their life, improve their education. They just took extreme ideology. So I guess we can move to talk about playbook 4. Maybe.
4. Exactly. Let's cue playbook number 4. Bring it up. There we go. Okay, talk us through this one, Mike.
Yeah, this one is also very, obviously, right? In China, they use the censorship and concentration camp, really to silence the political opposition. The picture here is in 1958, Chairman Mao launched called anti-rightist campaign. They basically destroyed hundreds of thousands of families of outspoken intellectuals. They sent them to concentration camp. Many of them died. They do hard in the very cold place in northeast of China, all over the country, all poor, mountain-ish, like that kind of places, right? Yeah. But you guess what? Like that is happening in 1958. After that, no one was afraid. No one was courage enough to challenge Chairman Mao. He launched the Great Leap Forward, starved over 30 million Chinese people to death. Right. So that is a consequence of this kind of silence the opposition in America. Conservatives being silenced in the college campus, they be canceled. Like the Congresswoman Maxine Waters encouraged support to harass Trump administration officials. A lot of things are happening in University of Georgetown. One law professor, she simply stated the truth that in her class, some Black African-American students, their academic performance are not good because they were admitted by affirmative action, right? So she simply stated the truth. She lost her job. Yeah. So, if we don't allow the truth, being discussed, we will not have a good policy, and then we become a one-party authoritarian state. That America, that is how dangerous it will become.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned Georgetown University, and just generally speaking across academia, the academia does seem to be very, very susceptible to this kind of thinking, this kind of cancel culture, this kind of denial of truth, as far as I can see it. If you speak truth in university, if you're a student or if you're a lecturer, whichever, it doesn't matter. Life is difficult, Mike, because the ideology, the wokeness has gone in there like a cancer. And I find it very disturbing. Again, in the UK, it's different. It hasn't advanced as radically, as fast as it is in the United States. It quite shocks me, as you say. There's loads of examples we could give, couldn't we, of where in academia, people are singled out and punished for just saying things that are different to what the narrative should be.
Yeah, about 3 years ago, I wrote an article, op-ed in Orlando Sentinel. I criticized political correctness. I wrote that, complex social issues need to be addressed by taking, a perspective from different angle, right? Not by unifying thoughts. I used to work at Siemens. When we solve the business issues, I have to listen to the team member, who can provide, suggestions, advice from different angles. Right, by unifying thoughts, just like what Chairman Mao did, right? Have a great leap forward, based on his personal knowledge, that will create a disaster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think what we'll move on to is the next part of the playbook as we go through these, which I think is, if we can bring up the next one.
This is also very similar, very damaging. Is really changing the culture, rewriting history, and indoctrinating the citizens. Example, like on the left is indoctrinating their citizens. In China, about 60 years ago, Chairman Mao launched the class struggle education. This picture actually is a marriage certificate during Cultural Revolution. It printed Chairman Mao's words, said, "Never forget class struggle." It means, when you get married, you need to be suspicious about your spouse. Maybe he's a class enemy, right? That is so crazy. It happened. Can we move to the right side?
Yeah, let's move across.
Yeah. In America, the third grade in elementary school, third grade students, when they're learning the math, they were indoctrinated by critical race theory to blame the dominant culture. Say, if a dominant culture in America is white, middle class, also educated, able-bodied, willing to work, they blame that, right? They, indoctrinate class struggle theory, the critical race theory, basically, in America. Actually, Joe Biden was trying to use the federal fund to educate critical race theory in all the K-12 in America. I participated in a national movement. We successfully, defeated his attempt. We wrote many letters, protested, put the, comments, reject that. So this is happening also, as I mentioned on the right side, they even label math as learning math as racist. Think about that. This kind of indoctrinated the whole nation. That's kind of exactly the same thing. Can we move to next page? I talk about the changing the history. Things. Yeah, we can have.
But just on this one, let's just we'll go to the next one. But how can maths be racist? How can mathematics be racist? Mathematics is factual. It's a very fact-based discipline. How is that possible? How can they even pretend that it's racist, Mike? I'm lost to understand that.
Their argument is if black are not performing well, must be racist, right? Standardized tests, they also claim is racist. So it's totally like, I tell you, the radical left, they lost all the common sense. They make up stories. Example, they even make up stories that Social Security is also racist. Do you know what's that reason? They say it's black because they don't have like a stable marriage. So many are single. In this case, Social Security actually, give some benefit to their spouse because black, they don't have spouse. So black becomes racist. Social Security becomes racist. The right way they should say, we really encourage black to have a stable marriage, to have, spouse. That is the right way to do that. But instead, they just attack, the Social Security as racist.
But which is really interesting because, like as you said, the correct solution to that problem, Mike, would be for black couples to get married and stay together and benefit. But instead, but they must know this. They must know that by not encouraging that, it's destructive. It's just socially acid, isn't it?
I tell you, okay. When I was in China during my childhood, I personally observed so many people they were indoctrinated by communist China, by Chairman Mao. So their statement, their argument is as naive as like what radical left is doing. So when they were indoctrinated, they lose their wisdom.
Yeah.
They just blindly follow. Example, I attended many meetings, hearing regarding the when the radical left tried to abolish standardized tests, right?
Yeah.
Every word they use, racial equities, disadvantage, minorities, they already been indoctrinated. They never challenged the assumption of that claim. They just blindly follow that claim. That is what happening in America. Some radical left, they are doing this.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move it on then. Let's move on to our next slide, which we've got. Well,
so changing the culture, right? In China, communists adopted, the Karl Marx theory and totally destroy all cultural heritage during Cultural Revolution. All the artifacts, all the paintings, all the historic temples, even the temple of our great sage Confucius were really damaged, were ruined. Right? They are totally ruined our culture. Chairman Mao did, is worse. Even, when Mongol conquered China, they did not destroy our culture as bad as like Chairman Mao. That's what he did. In America, we have like, our founding father, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. Actually, on the bottom was George Washington statue, was topped down. Think about that. Without George Washington, without Thomas Jefferson, America would not become so great country, right? So also like they invented the project 1619 project, claiming claiming that all American history is slave history. Say, slave built America. If that is the case, why I don't see so many advanced nations as great as America in Africa, right?
Yeah.
Why do not say that? It's really a great our founding fathers, funding principle, like free market system, rule of law, democracy. All these things make America greatest nation on earth. But they are trying to destroy, the whole, changing our culture, rewriting the history. That's exactly happened to China, So that's a striking similarity. No one can really deny this.
Absolutely. And I think the images in that last slide, I wonder, can we bring that last slide back a second? Because I just want to bring it back up again if we can. Just the images as, on the left, the Chinese culture being burnt, literally reduced in flames. And then on the right, as you rightly say, Mike, there we have, there's US history, and it's the same. To me, these pictures are almost identical in terms of it's the destructiveness, and as you say, they are revising, they're changing history, changing culture, and indoctrination. So it's exactly the same playbook, isn't it, Mike? It's exactly the same.
And also, I want to share with your audience, okay? In 1962, about 60 years ago, when Chairman Mao launched the class struggle education nationwide, right? That time there was not that kind of violence happening all over the country yet. But 4 years later, he was able to brainwash over tens of millions of Red Guards. So when he launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966, the indoctrinated Red Guards, they had launched violent social unrest, basically destroyed tortured millions of people, including my father, also murdered millions of Chinese people. So that is extremely dangerous, using this kind of divisive ideology to indoctrinate the citizens. That is how dangerous, that extreme dangerous. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yep, I get that. So, okay. So we understand Mao was behind Chinese cultural revolution. So the obvious question to ask you is, in your opinion, who is behind America's cultural revolution?
Yeah, I have one slide. Probably can.
We have a slide.
Yeah.
We bring it up. So let's chat this one through, because this is important. Let's talk on this. Yeah.
Sure. Actually, Mao, he is the evil guy behind the Chinese Cultural Revolution. But all the playbook things, theories, actually is from West, from Europe, Karl Marx, right, and Engels. They in 1849 they had published the Communist Manifesto, right?
Yep.
So want overthrow the capitalists through the violent class struggle. Chinese Cultural Revolution, actually, because this Marxist communist theory, Chairman Mao adopted, destroyed the Chinese culture, right? That is, China also is a victim of Marxist theory. That's what I'm trying to say. But in America, unfortunately, it's also coming from Marxist theory, right? In 1926, Antonio Ramsey, he famously says, because he did some rethinking, he was saying, in the communist revolution never happened in an advanced capitalist country like United Kingdom or America. Only happen in the backward, a little bit backward, like in Russia, in other countries, right? He found out. He said it was really the culture in capitalist country, they really supported the capitalist system. So he wanted to destroy our culture, Christianity, authority, sexual constraint, family, personal responsibility. So that is the very origin of cultural Marxism. In 1937, the Frankfurt School, a bunch of followers of Karl Marx, initially they formed called Marxist study group. They changed to Frankfurt School. You know what? During the World War II, president of Columbia University adopted them, allowed them to come to America. So when they come to America, they form the critical theory, critical legal theory. You guess what? They never were critical against communists. They pretty much critical against capitalist society. They found the problems, issues, so they try to transform this American society, also all the Western civilization. In 1989, critical race theory was emerged, right? So, but all the root actually was the intellectual elite being radicalized. They try to act like a god, try to transform Western society to become utopian, that kind of utopia, right? That is kind of when the economic Marxism try to achieve economic equity. Today's the critical race theory, they try to achieve so-called racial equity, right? So they are the same kind of ideology, just slightly change the formula.
So it's fun. I mean, that the history. I hope everyone's. If we just keep that back up on screen for a second, it's really important. It's a funnel going back to Marx and Engels, and then coming all the way down to 1989, where critical race theory then began to emerge as you say, Mike, as a subdivision of critical legal studies. And this is the punchline, really. It's all about destroying Western culture. That's why this is an important conversation. And everybody watching this needs to understand that. The aim of this is our destruction. It's as simple as that. And that's why, Mike, you've seen how that worked out in China for Chinese people when Mao got it going. And if they get it going here, well, that actually leads us nicely into the next bit, actually. So what happens? What are the consequences for the United States if this whole cultural Marxism, this whole wokeness, if it gets stronger and prevails? What will happen to the United States? Cue the next slide. Here we go.
Yeah, this is what I summarized. These are the hard lessons, we learned in China, right? So I summarized the consequence of Chinese Cultural Revolution, and then use that I derived really if we don't stop the critical race theory and woke culture, what will happen in America? America will become a nation that is divided by racial identity and focus on racial struggle. That will be divisive nation. Will become nation no longer provide equal opportunity to its citizen, but discriminate against the citizen based on skin color. It's happening. Will become oppressive nation, use censorship, cancel culture, and even violence to silence opposition. It's happening right now.
It is, absolutely, Mike. I mean, this is what we see happening, all the time. That the violence is used now to shut up people, and censorship is used by big tech. I mean, what's your views on? You talk about cultural suppression. If you take big tech, the likes of Twitter, people like they shut down voices in America that dissent from their particular ideologies. That's sinister. To me, that's exactly the same as what would happen in China.
It is actually, I wrote in my book, actually, is exactly the same thing. In America, we have First Amendment, right, of the U.S. Constitution, ban the government to to limit freedom of speech. You guess what? The radical left use their bodies in the big companies. They become their pawn to do that. You know, is they already is happening, and I wrote even my personal story, my personal story when I try to after I publish a conservative article, when I try to post in Facebook, they only allow me to post like 2 per day. But if I post other things, there's no limit, right? A lot of things happening is a shame. So continue on this is will become America become nation with not focused on educating our children to pursue good life, but indoctrinating innocent children to become social justice warrior, just like red guards to tear down the nation, right? One nation we lost pride, very proud history, invaluable cultural heritage. If the culture been changed, right? If history been rewritten.
Yeah.
Another point I have not elaborated, very much with you yet. We'll lose our technology leadership in the world, lose economic prosperity. Why? Because the radical left want to impose, according to critical race theory, want to impose racial equity. So everything will be racial quota down the road. The college will not pick the best, most talented. Company will not pick the most capable. So in this case, we discourage innovation. If we don't have innovation, we will surely lose technology leadership, lose the economic prosperity. So that's very dangerous. We become nation already happening, a nation diminished to law and order with rampant, crime all over the country, just like Mexico. It's happening in New York City, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, high crime. And finally, we become a nation with one-party authoritarian nation and suffering from one man-made disaster after another. That's what happened in China. When Mao Zedong established the government, he still have a bunch of other parties can at least give him advice. After he silenced the opposition, no one really can say anything challenging him.
And Mike, I mean, given that the United States, I mean, there is the Republican Party as a counter to the Democrat Party. So, I mean, how could you get to the position of a one-party state when you do seem to have, opposition? Let's say
2 things. Number one, if they are able to silence the opposition, right, and then no one will be courageously say their own, honest opinion. Like example, in many companies, they have so-called like diversity, inclusion, equity, commissions, trainings. If you say something politically incorrect, you are fired, right? So if they through this cancel culture to silence the oppositions, that will be one. A second is indoctrination. Very terrible. If they only educate the children with only one side of political viewpoint, they blindly follow them. Just like in California, it's already one party system. Republican can really win any elections there. So that I'm not trying to scare my fellow Americans. It's happening. We have to control that. We have to fight right now. Otherwise, if we allow everything happen like California, America will become a one-party system.
Well, you're right. I mean, California that's a very good example of what you're warning about. California seems to me to be totally dysfunctional in every way. They can't even keep the lights on in California, and yet they've embraced every aspect of this woke ideology. They've totally embraced critical race theory. And the thing is, you mentioned education. You see, when it comes to some things, this is where wokery is so destructive. Like, for example, if you're an engineer, you have to have a proper grounded understanding of things like physics and mathematics. You've got to understand those things, but I wouldn't want to be traveling across a bridge that's been designed by someone who's one of these sort of diversity hires, essentially, and who hasn't got a clue what they're actually doing, but they've been able to get into the position by virtue of their skin color.
Yes, exactly. China already had a hard lesson on that. During Cultural Revolution, Chairman Mao stopped the college entrance exam. Nobody requires the academic performance minimum requirements. As you know, that time Chinese college admitted students based on their family origin, based on
Mm,
their political profile. If somebody is
yeah,
revolutionary, grew up from like a peasant's family, this guy is eligible to go to college with a couple of recommendation. You know what? Because that, China for 10 years, it did not educate, adequate people to really manage the economy, run a factory. So end
yeah.
of the day, Chinese economy collapse, plus other reasons.
Yeah, and Mike, how do you look upon China now in 2022 in terms of how it functions from an economic point of view? And I mean, is there wokeness in China in 2022? What's it like compared to what it was like under Mao?
Yeah, I want to tell you, as I said earlier, Deng Xiaoping was wise enough to stop the class struggle movement, right?
Yeah,
Refocus China on economic development. So China had a huge economic growth, basically released individuals
yeah.
and
Oh, signal's gone. Yeah,
taking China back somewhat, like the constraint, very restrictive constraint about COVID-19. Also, some elements in China mentioned, have like using the so-called collectivism approach. So it's not as bad as Chairman Mao's time, but there's also a trend going back that way. But
yeah,
one thing I want to tell you, want to emphasize, actually Joe Biden and many radical left, when they try to launch the critical race theory, try to
yeah,
launch racial struggle in America, they are, they are not even as wise as Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping knew class struggle movement ruined China. But
yeah.
why the radical left want to launch racial struggle in America? That is same, equally dangerous.
Well, okay, but let's tackle that question. Why do you think they must? Do they not know what they're Joe Biden and those around him? Do they not know what critical race theory leads to, or do they not care?
I think there are two group of people. Some group of people are purely for personal greedy, for power, right? Power
Yeah,
hunger, right? As long as they can get a vote, they just like Chairman Mao, right? There's a
yeah,
group of people. But I also want to emphasize that tens of millions innocent Americans, especially young Americans,
yeah.
they have not had experience like me. They have not developed
No,
critical thinking skill. Example, when they make a judgment policy, they just blindly look at the purpose of policy. Say, okay, this policy want to help the disadvantaged communities, poor
mm,
people, must be good policy. Look at communism. Communism is state purpose. It's help all the poor people all over the world. You guess what? Its result, murdered or starved to death over 100 million people
yeah,
worldwide, right?
yeah,
Wherever communist touches, always have murder, always have poverty, right? So,
yeah,
I want to advise, actually, I believe overwhelmingly majority of left, American leaning left are good people, but they need to have critical thinking, critical like
yeah.
skill, thinking skills to really to have good judgment of policy.
Yeah, I think that's a good point actually, because we shouldn't demonize the people who think differently to us, because as you say, it's just that they lack the ability to critical reasoning. I would put it down to, and we've seen a lot of that over the past couple of years. By the way, when it comes to issues such as COVID and whatnot, there's been a lack critical reasoning. Mike, has gone out the window, and it surprised me. I thought maybe naively, I thought, well, most people will critically assess whatever information they're being given on whatever front. Turns out, if the media pushes them, they'll just accept whatever they are told. So it disturbs me, the lack of critical reasoning in the general population.
Yeah, yeah. And also, like in my book, actually, I give some like recommendations. The first thing we need to do is really going back to cherish America's founding principle,
Yeah.
like freedom of speech. That is so important, right? Even I'm a conservative. I will also give room for the liberals, left to speak up,
Yes,
because we need to have a balanced viewpoint, right? Another
exactly.
is the protection of individual rights. It's like parents' right. We should not allow the public schools to really to indoctrinate our children, right? We
Yeah.
need to cherish the free market system. We need to cherish rule of law, cherish back check and balance, right? So we should, in this case, we like also meritocracy, equal opportunity, all the great principles. So so the fundamental thing we need is, really to rescue America is really go back to America's founding principle laid out wonderfully by our founding father. We
Yeah.
also need a lot more people like me that listen to, like, to speak out, to really share what is real lesson. Unfortunately, many Americans don't know the consequence of a cultural revolution. They just believe socialism could be a good thing, changing the culture could be a good thing. No, if we American, we need improvement, we need evolution, which cannot afford to a revolution.
No, no. And yet there are vast swathes of America, Mike. I mean, you mentioned California, and I guess over in the East as well, New York and places like that. But in between those areas, there are reservoirs of critical thinking, of traditional American people who do value the things you've just talked about, like the family unit, like going out to work and looking after your family and stuff. There are those people as well. So it's different. The problem is it seems to be concentrated on the West Coast and the East Coast, and not so much in between, which is a different.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Even the East Coast, the great thing about America is our founding father. We had laid out a great constitution.
yeah,
Example is the Virginia election in the governorship, right?
yeah,
When the left went to extreme, so even the people in the middle, they wake up. They began to vote for conservative, right? So
yeah,
that is kind of, I'm still positive, optimistic about America. Absolutely, have
yeah.
optimism, but we need to really, stand up. We need to really speak up. So that.
Yeah. Do you think that Donald Trump represented a moment of awakening?
Yeah, when he launched the "Make America Great,"
MAGA. Yeah,
mega movement, absolutely, he represented that movement. Right now I think the very good things. Many conservative leaders like our governor DeSantis, Florida, right,
yep,
already step up, right. Many leaders already follow the suit, like takes the leadership in different areas. So
yeah.
I think it's a good sign.
Yeah, yeah. I think the situation is that there's lots of fantastic things about America, not least the founding fathers and all the things they put together, Mike. And for me, I think we do need to be very aware of the pernicious critical race theory. We have to be, and we need to push back, as I think we're seeing in a lot of schools, a lot of these sort of moms are pushing back at the school boards and whatnot, who are trying to impose this stuff. So that's really good to see. So as you say, there's encouragement to be taken, but wisdom comes from learning from what's happened before. And you've seen what happened in China, and we don't want that to happen across the West, because I have no doubt, Mike, if America was to fall to this ideology, so would Europe, so would the UK. It would all we would all follow, So it's really important that we do pay attention to the sort of things that you're saying, I think.
Yeah, and absolutely. Also, in my book, I wrote, right now the radical left use disguise. For example, they don't call it critical race theory, but they use
Yes.
terminology like racial equity, like a
Yeah.
white privilege, right?
Yes.
Systemic
Yeah.
racism, right? They already disseminated that. We have to fight back, So
Yeah.
that is areas where we need to take action.
We do. Well, look, the first action that everyone should take is buy yourself a copy of Mike's book. So we'll bring it back up on screen again. Here you go. Critical Race Theory, Woke Culture, as we talked about, America's dangerous repeat of China's Cultural Revolution. We cannot afford to go down the road that China went down. And Mike's whole life and his experience is testimony to that. So listen, that's something you should do. Mike, our time has come to an end, but it's been a real pleasure to speak with you. I hope you've enjoyed it. Very important lessons you've put out there. I'm sure the people who listen to me will be very sympathetic to what you're trying to do and what you're saying. So, so a big thank you from me for taking this time out of your day and spending it with us and the audience who have been tuning into this one. And it'll go out as a video, goes out as a podcast as well, goes out everywhere. So hopefully everyone will have enjoyed this. Mike, thank you very much for being here. Yeah, appreciate
it. Thank you very much. Great pleasure talking with you.
My pleasure too. And everyone, we'll catch up again on Wednesday evening. So catch you then. In the meantime, good night from myself and from Mike. Good night.
Good night.